Hej och hjärtligt välkomna till Pressträff Direkt, den här gången med Maha. Pressträff Direkt är ett samarbete mellan Direkt Studios, investerarbrevet.se och de bolag som presenterar. I kvällens sändning kommer vd Paulo Thiago Mendonça, CFO Bernardo Guterres och Alan Johnson, ansvarig för produktion, att gå igenom 2022 års sista kvartal och helårsresultatet och de aktiviteter bolaget har varit upptagna med. Som vanligt kommer ledningen att kunna svara på frågor från er som tittar live. Ni som tittar i efterhand och inte han får in några frågor hänvisas då, eller han får svar på era frågor ska det vara, får ställa dem då till bolaget på deras eminenta hemsida. Frågorna ställer ni i toppchatten. Presentationen kommer nu att fortsätta på engelska. Paulo, Bernardo, Alan, good afternoon. How are we today?
Very good, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here, everybody.
Excellent. You really seem to have hit the ground running. So please, and I assume that will be you, Paulo. Please take us through this eventful quarter.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure here to be with you all in this results presentation. I think I have myself here. Paulo, you have Bernardo Guterres, our CFO, and Alan Johnson, our Chief Operational Officer, to present today to you all. We can go next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we will start today here, summarizing the recent events from the last months. As you may have seen yesterday, we have concluded the acquisition of PetroReconcavo. It's a very, very important day here to Maha to have completed this milestone. You can go one slide, please. One slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think you can go one slide up, please. There is slide number 6. I think this presentation is not the most up, but I can move forward here, telling it a little bit about the recent events. So we had in November a new board members election, where this was the board has been modified. Also back in November 4th, we had a change in management, including myself and Bernardo. We joined the company as CEO and CFO. In December 5th, we announced the business combination with DBO. This adding 18.5 million barrels of 2P reserves. I think we can go one slide, please, because then we can catch up on what I'm saying here. Next slide, please. Perfect. Leave it there. Also, in December 2022, we completed a direct issue of $19 million net of fees to raise via direct issue. This was a very important milestone to the company to strengthen the balance sheet. And we successfully completed this transaction, bringing not only cash to the company, but also long-term investors and fundamental investors. On December 28th, we signed the divestment of Maha's Brazilian entity to PetroReconcavo. We announced it on before year end. And January 28th, we concluded with our partner in Oman the joint operating agreement for Block 70. And this was the last event to complete the assignment of the stake. On February the 2nd, we appointed a new Chief Legal Officer and a Head of Investor Relationships, Barbara and Jacob, which we're very happy to have them here on board. On February 3rd, we issued a new certification of reserves from McDaniel, as we indicated back in October that we would make a reassessment on the reserves, and we concluded this in February. And finally, we're very happy here to have completed yesterday the transaction with PetroReconcavo, in which Maha has already received one of the first installment, and the second installment will receive 6 months from now. And now we're very happy here to have completed this first cycle of reshuffling of the assets, and now the company is really focused on its strategy on becoming a very cash flow oriented company with a strong balance sheet, focus on inorganic and organic growth of oil and gas, and always focus on production. So here, passing here through the slide number 8, as I mentioned, the divestment of Maha's Brazilian entity was of a total consideration of up to $186.9 million. That includes the purchase price plus the earnouts, plus working capital adjustments, and the net cash that was held in the Brazilian entity, totaling $186.9 million. Regarding the DBO's acquisition, the SPA was executed in February, and the company has scheduled a general meeting from March 29th to have the approval here from the shareholders. We're strongly convinced that this transaction was made at a very attractive transaction multiple of 0.23 price to NAV, and this will add to the company 18.5 million barrels of oil equivalent and a production of almost 2,000 barrels of oil equivalent. Giving here an update on Oman, we are drilling the 7th well, and we expect here to start testing in the very short term within this quarter, and all the team here is very excited with this asset, and hopefully we will be announcing good results in the very short term. As I mentioned, the conclusion of the farm out agreement happened in January, and we are expecting the settlement, the financial settlement within this month of March from AFAC Energy of the reimbursement for the past costs and investments. Regarding USA, we have hired Energy Advisors Group to act as our financial advisor on the potential divestment of the USA assets. So here in this graph, we can show how stays the production profile for Maha post conclusion of the DBO transaction. In the last quarter, we had in Brazil 2,145 barrels in TA, and 195 in Tartaruga, and 281 in IB. Excluding the divestment from Brazil and adding the Peroá cluster and Papa-Terra cluster, we reach 2,357 barrels. We basically reach almost the same production that we previously had before this divestment, with a much more attractive consideration price for this acquisition. So we would be reaching almost 2,400 barrels of oil equivalent of oil and gas. I think we can move to the next slide, please. Updating here a little bit about the quarter production from TA and Tartaruga, remembering that these assets have been divested, but in the last quarter it was still under Maha's management. We during 2022, the company faced a reduction in production to lots of reasons, but one of them was the rig shortage in the local market at all, and in addition to the natural depletion of the wells. In the fourth quarter, the company, and congratulate a lot here Alan and the technical team for having done a successful workover campaign that helped with the production recovery. GT3 well was converted from a dual jet pump completion to a single commingled ESP producer. We also had T1 production was recompleted as a single string jet pump producer, and GT4 we also had replaced, and the well is back on stream. Regarding Tartaruga, the company submitted a competitive bid for Petrobras' stake of 25%, and this was the completed here the Maha's management on these two assets yesterday. The production for the fourth quarter, as we mentioned, stayed in 2,621 barrels of oil equivalent per day. You can go to the next slide, please. Here we want to show to the market a little bit about the new composition of the reserves and net present value for the Maha with DPO's acquisition. And we wanted here in this slide to give more details. I think we made the breakdown of the 1P, 2P, 3P reserves, and also the NPV for each of those assets. And happy here to receive suggestions from the shareholders which additional breakdowns we would like to see, but we want here to be very transparent on having these breakdowns. So here, assuming the completion of Oman's asset to Mafraq Energy, and assuming the company concludes the DBO's transaction on March 29th in the general meeting, the company will have in 1P reserves 14.2 million barrels, 21.7 million barrels of oil equivalent of 2P reserves, and 27.3 of 3P. In terms of NPV 10, we are talking here of a range of $120 to $286 million, being the 2P scenario of $191 million. When we add up with the current cash position and the proceeds from the sale to PetroReconcavo, the company would have a gross asset value of 335 to almost $501 million dollars, sorry, and the midpoint $406 million, excluding the BTG's debt and the contingent payment from DBO. We are talking here of an NAV of on the 2P scenario of $338 million. So we see here a very solid asset value and great part of it in cash. So the company really has here a very strong potential to close the gap price from the current market cap to a higher and more solid asset value. These excludes the contingent resources from Oman, as we can see here below. As we know, Oman, our resources, they are still contingent resources. We need still to finalize testing and submit the declaration of commerciality to prove the company has feasible resources, and in the future have here also transform this into reserves and having the NPV also for these assets. So these are still separated here as contingent resources. We can go to next slide, please. I will pass here the word to Bernardo, which will pass through the financial highlights of the fourth quarter.
Okay, thanks, Paulo. Hello, everyone. Very nice to talk with you guys again. I think we can move to the next slide. So basically here we illustrate how was, our last quarter and especially our full year in 2022. So just catching up with what Paulo mentioned in the operational highlights, we had a very strong first quarter, which supported most of our good results in the year. So that's why when comparing 2021 with 2022 in terms of revenues, EBITDA, net income, net back, we have a better year when compared to 21. Still, as of the second quarter of 2022, we had those problems with rigs and also with some wells, which lowered our production. But fortunately, as Paulo mentioned, we congratulate Alan here for recovering this production in Q3 and also in Q4. So very fast here, our net daily production went from 2,389 barrels of equivalent oil per day to 2,621 on a quarterly basis. So that's why we had this recovery in this fourth quarter. Still, we had a reduction in our net revenue, which was basically affected by a lower average Brent price, which is our main benchmark here for pricing when we compare Q4 to Q3. In terms of EBITDA, aside from the sales price, we also had some extra costs, extra expenses with the workovers that we had to recover. So that's why our EBITDA went down from $9.6 million in Q3 to $8.7 in Q4, and obviously this reflected a lot our net results. It's important to say that in a yearly scenario, although we had all these stops, although we had all of this fluctuation Brent prices, we had a much better year in 2022 when compared to 2021. I think we can move to the next slide. When we look into a cash flow perspective, I would like to highlight this slide here that we had the capital raise by the year end in late December, which was very important, as you can see in this upper graph, to support our capital structure, to enable us to have our capital structure very strong in a moment where we didn't have the confirmation or even sign the transaction with PetroReconcavo. So this capital raise was really important to prepare Maha, to leave Maha with a balance sheet to support all of this workover operation, all of this capex, and especially the capex that we had to disburse in Oman. As Paulo mentioned, Oman is entry into its 7th drilled well, so it was very capital intensive in the last 3 quarters. So we judged that it was very important for us to make this raise. If you look on a capex perspective, basically in Q3, in Q4 we maintain what we had in Q3, which basically half of it was to the Brazilian operation for all of these capex disbursements that we had in Tiê, especially in Tiê, and in a small amount in Tartaruga. And in the Omani operation, we continued with our exploration investments, with the drilling activity and initiating the building of some of the facilities. In terms of banking, we continue with our unique bank debt, which is our long-term debt with BTG. We fulfilled our payments. Currently, our outstanding balance is at $46 million, and we ended the year with a very strong net cash of $23 million. I think we can go to the next slide. Here's just to compose one of an important metric, which is our netback. So looking to 2022 against 2021, the Brent price that is our benchmark, it really increased here from one year to the other, and this supported the decrease in our total production when we compare 2022 to 2021. If we subtract the royalties and our production expense, we reach into a yearly netback of $54 $38.72 per barrel against $38.18 dollars per barrel in 2021, which was a really strong growth. On a quarterly basis, I think we can highlight here the increase in the expenses, right? We can see clearly that in Q1, we had $11.15 per barrel against almost more than twice in Q3 and Q4, which basically reflects the workovers, the expenses that we have in order to recover the wells that we had problem in Q2, especially at the end of Q2 and beginning of Q3. I think we can move to the next slide. And this slide basically consolidates and describes what happened in the last year, right? So we had our production increase in the last quarter. Still, we had this problems in Q2 and Q3, beginning of Q3, which reflected in this more expenses in last year. Our capex program and exploration program really went it's really on track, so we are very happy to see things evolving in Oman, right? And to support these two this combination of events, we had to raise capital, right? Which enabled us to reach, by the end of the quarter, as we see on the first graph, with $23 million. And more recently, obvious, we, as Paulo mentioned, following our strategy of reshuffling of assets, of bringing war chests for us to pursue growth, we sold our Brazilian assets to PetroReconcavo, and right now, although it doesn't make part of this presentation, we understand that we are very well capitalized to pursue our strategy, our midterm strategy of growing Maha. I think we can move to the next slide. This is basically a summary of our income statement, and as you can see, we have positive results on a yearly basis, like our revenues increasing 31%, our EBITDA increasing 15%, our net result increased 6.2%, with a reduction in our net debt in 23.7%. I think we can go to the next slide. So this is basically, we can summarize how our share price behaved by the end of the year. We had a very good scenario when we had our peak production in the beginning of 22, but obviously there is a very big correlation between Maha's share price and the Brent price. So I would say that in a share price scenario, aside from specific events throughout the year, as like the change in management and also this recovering of some wells, our share price basically behaved together with Brent price. In terms of numbers, as I said, our current market capitalization, it's around $134 million, with $22.8 million of net debt. This makes an enterprise value of $157 million. It's interesting to highlight that we sold the Brazilian assets for a total consideration. We can reach a total consideration of $186 million. We have a very strong, we ended the year with a very strong cash position of $23 million and very low leverage, with only 0.41 times leverage. I think this is a summary of our financial performance last year.
Thank you, Bernardo. Just to conclude here, we are here very happy to have concluded this transaction with PetroReconcavo, and we are here in a very strong position to follow the strategy that we have started at last year, doing this reshuffling of assets and looking here to opportunistic acquisitions. We are very active in the pipeline, and we do believe that not only we will be able to close this gap of valuation between the NAV and the current market cap by showing the market the cash flow generation these assets can deliver, but also using this war chest the company has in its cash to buy assets at very attractive multiples. In addition to that, we are very excited and hopefully optimistic to see the results in Oman, which is an asset that can really here provide a very significant upside on the story of Maha. With that said, we conclude here the presentation of the fourth quarter results, and we are here open to questions. Thank you very much.
As always, we have received a couple of questions beforehand, and I can see that people are stamping in a couple of questions here. So I will try to moderate them in some sort of orderly fashion here. And you ended here by mentioning Oman, and I'd like to combine the questions. One is, when will the transaction regarding the farm out in Oman be completed? And if you at that point could give us an update. I believe you in the beginning of your presentation mentioned March, but we're in March, and there will be some sort of general meeting as well on the 29th. So if we start with the farm out.
Perfect. So we expect to conclude the financial settlement within this week. So we expect to have it concluded. And with that, the assignment is 100% completed regarding Oman, and that's very important to Maha to go on with the plans in testing the wells, which we also expect here to happen within the month of March.
So end March is something for the market to look out to. And here is a question that is easier probably said than for you to reply, but it's also stating of the fact, and Bernardo mentioned that at the end of his presentation. If we look at the recent transactions, you will receive the total proceeds that surpasses its current market cap, and if you then have some sort of result in Oman, then you will have a very interesting situation. I think it's worthwhile highlighting, but can you tell us anything on any strategy to close the gap?
Sure. Very, very good question. I think as we see here today, the company has almost $214 million of cash plus receivables. And if we consider the DBO's transaction, we are talking here of an NPV of almost $166 million, right? If we add up our other assets, goes to $191 million. I'm talking here on the 2P scenario. We strongly believe that with the results that those assets are generating cash, we will be able to show the market that not only has the company has an asset value that is cash, so that shouldn't have any discount, but the asset of DBO should really be much higher than what is being reflected in the current market cap, and not only in terms of reserves multiple, not only in terms of discount to NAV, but also in terms of, which is the most important, how much cash these assets are generating at this Brent level. So we strongly believe that this gap will narrow by the market being able to see each quarter how much cash those assets are generating, and the new investments that are being done to increase production, the very quick payback those assets have, because all the infrastructure not only belongs to the consortium, but also is already ready to increase the production. But it's a little bit the answer to this question.
Yeah, and also I think it's worthwhile highlighting then, and it's it's probably not your position to comment there, but But basically, it seems like the market has a good opportunity to invest in Maha, because it seems like the market have been very focused on geopolitical situations, and you have been pretty active in the situation here. I would like to go on here with a geopolitical question, and that's the high inflation and the high interest rates. How will that pursue, if it will pursue, your growth strategy? Assets will obviously be more expensive, but perhaps there will be more stressed assets out there. Do you see this as an opportunity or as a hurdle?
Let me start answering this question, and then I will also pass you to Bernardo. But in fact, with the high interest rates, the markets are really shifting investments from equity to fixed income. We saw Brazil, for instance, the interest rate going from 2% to current almost 14%. So the fixed income is very generous, it's paying good rates. So these allows to have even higher rates for equity. So so we see this as an opportunity of us having a very strong cash position to really deploy this capital at equity rates. I'm talking here of 30, 40, 50%. And why we believe we have this opportunity? First, because there's a lot of scarcity of equity, because everybody is migrating to the fixed income. So if we have cash for equity, we will be able to capture this opportunity. So we do see here this increase in the fixed income as a very strong opportunity for those who are capitalized to select very attractive and opportunistic assets. And one example of that, in my opinion, was the DBO's asset, which we acquired at very interesting levels. But Bernardo, please add here the answer.
No, sure. I think Paulo covered ballpark of this answer. We're seeing a worldwide scenario, not only in the oil and gas, but especially in the oil and gas companies, high-level companies which are leveraged, having struggling to find not only equity but also debt. I think the world's capital market in general, it's still in a, let's say, in a not in a sleepy mode, but it wasn't so active. It was like in 2021, for example, here in Brazil, it was really exciting. But nowadays, it's very difficult to compete with the fixed income products, with the fixed income strategy, right? So there's a sentence that Paulo copies from and says a lot, that cash is king at this moment, right? So we are very happy to do this transaction with Petro-Recôncavo, because it enables Maha to have liquidity, to have cash, and to move fast in this transaction. This transactions, for you to be opportunistic, you need to move fast. You need to provide liquidity. You need to provide equity to the seller, so as to gain traction. So we do believe we have some already looking up for some targets. We have some good strategy here to move fast, and I believe that having cash and not only depending on that puts Maha in a position of attractiveness as a buyer.
Excellent, thank you for that. And then we have obviously a lot of questions on where your next targets would be, and it would probably not be so smart to tell the market that you're going to buy something that is listed. But would you be focusing on Brazil, Peru, Oman, the US? Can you give us any feel for what you're doing?
Yeah, no, we do see here a very good opportunity in Latin America, and mainly for that reason. Those were the countries that maybe going back to the previous question, where the interest rates went up, so the available liquidity is migrating to the fixed income. So there's a lot of scarcity to equity investments in Latin America. I think US is a space where we are planning to divest. I think it's a small asset. We want to have more scale in a region, and we do see here Latin America as a very important oil region. We also have been very happy with the Omani environment. We do believe that Oman is a very interesting country to invest, but in fact we are still in a moment where we need to prove our assets and declare it commercial, hopefully. So we think we're going to step behind in Oman still.
Thank you for that. And I have one question here coming in from one of the viewers, and they are referring to news about the crude export tax in Brazil. Any comments on that? And if so, how will that affect you? Are you able to comment?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very recent event that happened yesterday. There was a provisional measure that there might have for the next 4 months an export tax of 9.2% on the revenues. Of course, when there's 9.2%, you reduce from your revenues, but you also have the tax shield of 34% of this cost. In fact, is a negative impact for companies who has assets that export. Regarding the DBO's assets, one of them is gas, so it's not impacted because this export is only for oil. And regarding Papa-Terra, today this oil is not exported; it's sold to the domestic market. So, but that doesn't mean it's not going to export in the future. But today we see that the assets that Maha are acquiring there, they wouldn't be impacted. But we need to understand if this export tax will keep after the 4 months, or it's only limited to 4 months. If it's only the 4 months, we believe that we shouldn't have any impact. But for the medium term, we need to evaluate which is the impact on that. But in fact, for exporters, it was not a good news.
And just adding up to Paulo, in our growth strategy in looking for assets, obviously that we will factor this, and we will understand and factor this provision, this impact in when we're negotiating or when we're looking for new assets. So it's in a growth strategy perspective, we're basically rebalancing prices here if this goes forward after the 4 months.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And could you just give us an update on the DBO transaction? This is a question that we received ahead of the presentation. And obviously, you've been very busy here. So what are your expectations after jumping into this asset?
No, I think we have scheduled a general meeting on March 29th to have this subject taken to the shareholders, and we do believe that these are very solid assets. The reasons we have explained, they are producing assets that generate cash flow with own infrastructure and with very quick payback on additional investments to increase production. We also have presented to the market a fairness opinion in terms of valuation. So we do believe this is a very attractive transaction to the market, and also we do see here with lots of good eyes the partners that are coming here, Sven, Jetil, and Howard. They're for sure shareholders that will bring lots of technical expertise, financial expertise. So we do believe this is a very good composition to Maha and to the base of shareholders.
Excellent, and I think that will conclude the questions that we have received ahead and also during this presentation. But it's very interesting to see compare the current proceeds, your cash position, with obviously your market cap. So it would be very interesting to follow Maha going forward, and as you mentioned, the 29th will be a headline, and I also believe that there is an oil. 29th
March will be an important month to the company.
Yes, and there's also an oil conference going on now, as I understand it. So there will be more news, I think, around Maha during all of March. Is that correct?
Yes, I think March is an important milestone.
Excellent. Well, with that, Alan, Paolo, and Bernardo, thank you very much for taking the time. Very interesting times indeed on a macro and on a micro view. So with that, I thank everyone who's watched and asked questions. And if there is any other questions, please look up the email on the website for Maha. So with that, thank you very much and have a continuous pleasant evening.
Thank you.